The sound of shoes pounding on the floor echoed like a drumbeat. The ball bounced, kissed the backboard, and sailed through the hoop. A perfect shot. In that moment, the arena should have erupted in cheers. But it didn't. Instead came the boos, the shrill whistles, the bitter curses. He stood there, sweat streaming down his face, heart racing. He had just scored. But the crowd wasn't looking at the scoreboard. They were looking at the color of his skin. That day, basketball was no longer a game. It became a ruthless mirror, reflecting a cruel truth. Talent meant nothing if his skin wasn't the shade society wanted. The coach turned away, unable to meet his eyes. The arena manager coldly pointed to the door. "You can't play here. Rules are rules." He walked out in silence. The sweat on his brow burned hotter than the floodlights on the court. In his head echoed one searing question: if I were white, would they have thrown me out? If I were white, would this crowd be on its feet cheering me? They called this a free society. But for him, freedom ended the moment the whistle blew. He had heard the church preach, "Be forgiving. Be compassionate." But how could he forgive when even his simplest dream, just to play basketball, was blocked because of his skin color? How could he show compassion when his sweat hitting the hardwood wasn't enough to buy him a fair chance? That night, he sat alone in a cramped room. Tears mixed with sweat, soaking his shirt. Yet instead of despair, something else rose within him, the sound of the ball swishing through the net, pure, sharp, undeniable. It rang in his head like a promise. If they won't let me play, I'll make them regret ever banning me. If they erase my name from the roster, I'll carve it into history with every shot I make. This was no longer a game. This was a battle. Not measured in points. Not measured in trophies. A battle measured in grit, in sweat, in tears, in the belief that justice could resound across the hardwood floor. And you, the audience of this story, remember this. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how a black athlete, once driven off the court for the color of his skin, turned sweat and tears into a weapon that shattered the walls of prejudice, and made the entire nation rise to its feet in applause. He was born in a neighborhood people called the dark side of the city. The streets were rough dirt and gravel, the crooked wooden houses looked ready to collapse at any moment. Every night, the sound of barking dogs mixed with police sirens became a familiar soundtrack. His mother worked at a laundromat, his father did heavy labor. Dinner was usually dry bread, sometimes with a thin bean stew. But even in that poverty, he found his own world, a basketball. His first ball wasn't a real basketball. It was an old rubber ball, flat, patched together with tape. His first hoop was a broken iron ring tied to an electric pole outside his house. The court was just a patch of uneven ground covered in gravel. But to him, it was the biggest arena in the world. Every shot, whether missed or made, carried his dream of escaping this cramped street. Every day, after helping his mother carry water and assisting his father with heavy loads, he ran to that court. Sweat streamed down his body, his shirt soaked, yet his eyes always shone. The kids in the neighborhood laughed at him. "Shoot all you want, you'll never leave this place." He just bowed his head, picked up the ball, and kept shooting. Sometimes, he walked past the white high school. Inside, the basketball court gleamed, the backboards were brand new, the nets spotless white. White kids played to cheers and applause. He stood behind the fence, watching every shot. A tear slid down his cheek, mixing with sweat. If I had been born with a different skin color, would I get to play on that court? He already knew the answer. But in his heart, a voice whispered, "One day, I'll walk in there. I won't be standing outside the fence anymore." One afternoon, the chance came. A friend secretly snuck him into the white school's gym. Nervously, he held the ball. The sound of his shoes striking the polished floor made his heart pound. The ball left his hands, soared, and swished through the net. The sound was pure, sharp, and the entire gym went silent. But it wasn't admiration. It was horror. Cold, cutting stares pierced him. "A black kid just scored here?" The supervisor stepped forward, not yelling, only saying coldly, "Get off the court. This isn't your place." he lowered his head and walked out. Sweat dripped onto the hardwood, leaving dark stains. In his heart, he felt a humiliation he had never known. That night, lying on his rickety bed, he couldn't sleep. His sweat hadn't dried, his tears soaked the pillow. But in his mind, the sound of that swish still echoed. It drowned out the insults. He knew that moment was more than just a basket. It was a declaration: I can. I did it. And I will do it again. From then on, he trained like mad. Every night under the yellow streetlight, he shot until his arms trembled and his legs gave out. Every shot was an oath: I will come back. I will walk into the place they banned me from. And this time, they won't be able to ignore me. His parents worried. His mother often said, "Son, don't dream too much. Life isn't fair for people like us." He bowed his head and stayed quiet. But when he stepped onto the court, the ball in his hands was the only answer he needed. At 14, he played in a street ball game. The other team was filled with older, stronger boys. The crowd gathered around, shouting and cheering. When the ball reached him, the noise stopped. He jumped, shot, swish. The crowd exploded. For the first time, he saw admiration in their eyes, instead of contempt. But the joy was short-lived. As the rumors spread, whispers followed: if that kid were white, he'd already be recruited by the school team. He heard it. His heart ached. Once again, his skin color cast a shadow over his dream. He began keeping a journal, filling each page with shaky handwriting. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow I'll shoot straighter. Tomorrow they'll have to notice me. The notebook, old and sweat-stained, became proof of an unbreakable belief. One night, while the whole neighborhood slept, he kept practicing under the streetlight. The ball bounced, rose, and fell into the hoop again and again. Sweat drenched him, tears blurred his eyes, but he refused to stop. The ball was his breath. And basketball was no longer a game, it had become his reason to live. At 18, he stood tall, muscles forged from years of relentless training. His talent was no longer just a rumor in the poor neighborhood. It was undeniable every time he touched the ball, jumping so high it seemed he could touch the ceiling, shooting so precisely that the crowd doubted their own eyes. In the black community, he was called the Hope. People whispered, "One day, he'll step onto the big court, and they'll have to acknowledge us." The first chance came when he was invited to try out for a semi-pro team. The day he put on his first uniform, sweat soaked through his shirt, his heart pounded like a drum. He believed this was the first step toward his dream. But reality was harsher than he imagined. At the pre-game press conference, a white reporter stood and asked, his voice cold, "What makes you think you belong in this league, which has always been reserved for whites?" The room burst into laughter. He lifted his head, stared straight, and answered slowly, "I believe basketball doesn't ask about skin color." No applause followed. His words didn't sound like truth to them, they sounded like defiance. On game day, he walked onto the court. Lights blazed down, thousands of eyes fixed on him. But instead of cheers, the arena roared with jeers, shrill whistles, and angry shouts, "Go back where you came from." The ball trembled in his hands. Then he dribbled, cut past two defenders, and soared. A thunderous dunk. The backboard shook violently. Silence fell. Sweat dripped down his face as he stared coldly into the stands. In that instant, he proved that talent could not be denied. But the victory didn't last. Right after the game, the organizers announced, "Black athletes are not permitted to continue competing. His name is removed from the tournament." No further explanation. The news spread like a knife through the black community. People raged, but they were powerless. The unspoken laws of white society outweighed talent. He left the court, his shoes pounding heavily against the floor. His jersey drenched with sweat, his heart crushed under humiliation. Yet in his eyes, the fire did not go out. That night, alone in his room, he stared at the cracked wall and whispered, "If they erase my name from the list, I'll carve it into history. Not on paper, with sweat, with shots no one can deny. In the days that followed, he kept training. No more big stage, no scoreboard. Just him, the ball, and the streetlights. People mocked. Doesn't he get it? They've already shut the door. He didn't answer. Each shot was a reply. Each drop of sweat on the concrete was a period at the end of his statement. At street ball games, he played as if it were the national championship. Crowds gathered, at first to mock, then fell silent, and finally clapped. In their eyes, he wasn't just a player. He was proof that talent could survive every denial. Once, a young white reporter quietly came to watch. After the game, he approached, voice trembling. "You should be on the big hardwood floor. I don't understand why they do this." He wiped the sweat from his face and answered, "Because they're afraid. Afraid of the truth." The truth he spoke of was this: no barrier can forever hold back a man who has sworn his life to his dream. He kept living quietly, but each day, the sound of the ball bouncing on the concrete court echoed like the heartbeat of a man who refused to surrender. People said he was finished. They whispered, "He'll forget basketball soon enough." But every night, under the pale yellow streetlights, the ball still swished through the net, sweat still fell, and the fire in his chest only burned brighter. Rumors spread from the street ball games. People began speaking his name, not in official leagues, but in hushed conversations. "There's a black guy who shoots with unreal precision. Jumps like a tiger. Plays as if gravity doesn't exist." At first, it was just talk within the black community. But soon, a few curious coaches came to see for themselves. They didn't believe the stories, until they witnessed it: a young man dribbling through 4 defenders, leaping above them all, and dunking with such force that the court trembled. One evening, an informal exhibition game was held. The team was short-handed, and he was asked to step in. As he walked onto the court, the crowd stirred, laughter broke out. "They put a black guy in? This should be funny." He didn't answer. He just held the ball, took a deep breath, and let his sweat do the talking. The game began. He moved like the wind. A drive, a leap, the ball released, swish. The laughter died. He charged again. Another perfect shot. Then a dunk. The crowd was stunned into silence. Every shot he made was more than points on the scoreboard. They were hammer blows against the wall of prejudice. They were declarations no one could silence. "I am here. And I'm not leaving." When the game ended, no one was laughing. Even those who mocked him before nodded in reluctant respect. If this guy isn't allowed to play, then what fairness is left in basketball? The next day, newspapers cautiously wrote, "A talent buried only because of skin color." They didn't name him outright, but everyone knew who they meant. From then on, the underground games he played drew overflowing crowds. Black fans came to cheer and take pride. White fans came out of curiosity, to see for themselves. And slowly, curiosity turned into admiration. A young reporter once asked him, "Do you think you'll ever be accepted?" He wiped his sweat, looked straight ahead, and replied, "I'm not waiting for acceptance. I'll just keep playing until the truth can't be denied." That sentence spread like wildfire. It was repeated in cafes, on street corners, inside cramped homes. To the black community, he was no longer just a player. He was living proof that truth would prevail. One evening, in the stands, a famous coach sat quietly, watching. When he threw down his 10th dunk, the man rose to his feet and clapped, one lone pair of hands among the sea of people. But that clap was the signal: society could no longer ignore him. He didn't celebrate. He simply picked up the ball, wiped the sweat from his face, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." The arena lights blazed as bright as day. Thousands of fans packed the stands, waving flags, shouting, roaring. For the first time in history, a black athlete officially stepped onto the hardwood floor of a major league game. He stood at the sideline, clutching the ball. Sweat ran down his forehead, not from fear, but from the weight of a dream pressing on his shoulders. From the stands came cheers, but mixed within were boos, jeers, and piercing whistles. "Get him out of here. This isn't your place." Some held signs, "Keep basketball white." Others hurled paper and bottles. The noise pounded in his ears like hammers. But he didn't bow his head. He took a deep breath, let the sweat drip onto the floor like a vow. "If I quit, they win. If I keep going, the ball will answer for me." The game began. The ball touched his hands. The whistles blared again, sharp and mocking. He dribbled, sliced past 2 defenders, soared. A thunderous dunk shook the arena. For a few seconds, the boos fell silent. Only the backboard rattled violently. He landed, lifted his head. No arrogance. Only a message: "I am here. And I'm not going anywhere." His talent was undeniable. Every precise shot, every clever pass left the crowd stunned. Even those who had screamed for him to leave now sat frozen, forced to watch. But with recognition came threats. After games, slips of paper appeared in his locker: "Leave before it's too late." Some nights, outside the hotel, extremist groups blocked the street, shouting, "You're dirtying our basketball." He walked straight through, cold sweat down his spine, but never looking back. In the locker room, prejudice lingered. Some teammates turned their backs, refused handshakes, refused to pass him the ball. But there were also quiet pats on the shoulder. "Just play. You're better than all of them." Few, but enough to keep him standing. The press began to change tone. From sneering lines to headlines like, "The Unlikely Star." They praised him, but always with a sting. Despite his poor upbringing and the fact that he is black, he plays on par with the best. Those words, "despite," cut like knives. But he only folded the paper and went back to practice. Because he knew, every drop of sweat on the training floor was stronger than 1,000 lines of contempt. And then, the unthinkable happened. In a major game, when he slammed down his 3rd consecutive dunk, the arena erupted. At first, just a few scattered claps. Then spreading, louder, swelling into a roar. Even the white fans who once despised him had no choice but to rise to their feet. He didn't raise his hands in celebration. He wiped his sweat, looked up at the stands, and let them see. "I don't need your pity. I only need you to acknowledge the truth." That night, the arena was packed. Every seat filled, the roar of cheers mixing with whistles of scorn, rising into a storm of sound. This was the championship final, the game the entire nation was watching. He stood at the sideline, jersey number 23 clinging to his back, sweat already breaking through his skin though the game hadn't even begun. Years of rejection, countless times erased from rosters, all of it had led to this moment. There was no turning back. Either prove himself, or disappear. The whistle blew. The ball hit the hardwood. He threw himself into the rhythm he knew best, dribbling, passing, leaping high. Each step carried echoes of memory, from the crooked rim tied to a lamppost, to the long nights of sweat and tears. And now, everything had brought him here. The crowd exploded as he threw down his first dunk. The cheers that had greeted him were swallowed up by unstoppable cheers. He didn't look at the stands. He didn't need to. He knew if he did, he'd see shock, confusion, and even tears from the very people who once despised him. In the second half, he drove past 3 defenders, rose, and released a perfect shot. Swish. The sound rang pure, like a declaration. Justice could be written right here on this hardwood floor. In the stands, a silver-haired man stood up. It was the famous coach who had once told the press flatly, "Black men don't belong in this league." Today, he rose to his feet, clapping hard, eyes wet. That lone applause spread like wildfire, until it became a tidal wave. When the clock hit 0, his team had won. The arena erupted. For the first time in history, a black athlete had not only played in the championship final, but had been the hero who delivered victory. He sank to the floor, jersey soaked with sweat. Not from exhaustion, but from the weight of knowing he had just opened a door that could never be closed again. The next day, the newspapers were no longer cautious. Headlines blazed, "Hero of the championship." Symbol of a new era. No more despite being black. No more outsider. Just one undeniable truth: he was a star. But for him, glory wasn't in the trophy. It was in the moment after the game, when a white boy ran up asking for an autograph, eyes shining. "Mister, I want to play basketball like you." He bent down, wiped the sweat from his brow, and smiled. "Play better than me. But remember this, never let anyone tell you that you don't belong, just because of your skin color." The arena roared again. And in that moment, he understood, he hadn't just won a game. He had defeated a prejudice. And when white and black hands clapped together in unison, the sound was proof that the world had changed. Many years had passed since that historic final. The arena had changed, brighter lights, wider stands. But every time he returned, the echo of sneakers on hardwood still carried him back to those first days, when the whole world seemed against him. His hair had turned gray, his steps no longer swift. But his eyes still burned with fire. People called him a legend. Black children in the neighborhood called him the trailblazer. He no longer played professionally. Instead, he stood on the small community court where once a crooked iron hoop had been tied to a lamppost. Now, a brand new backboard stood tall, the concrete court freshly laid. Children shouted, laughed, and chased the ball as it pounded against the ground. A skinny black boy walked up to him, eyes shining with both fear and hope. "Sir, if people tell me I can't, what should I do?" He bent down, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice warm but firm. "Let the ball answer. Every drop of sweat, every shot you take is a reply no one can deny." His words weren't just for that boy. They were a message for a whole generation. He often sat on the steps of the court, watching the children play. White kids and black kids together, laughing, falling, passing the ball to one another. He smiled, because this was the image he had dreamed of his entire life. In the papers, they wrote of him as a symbol. He didn't just change basketball. He changed how America saw fairness. But for him, legacy wasn't on the printed page or in the titles. Legacy lived in the laughter of children, in the swish of shots taken on courts where no one was barred from playing. One day, after practice, a group of young players came to him. One of them, a tall white boy, said, "I play today because of you. Without you, we wouldn't be standing on the same court." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. In that moment, he knew every drop of sweat, every tear shed years ago had been worth it. That night, alone in his old room, he looked at the photo on the wall, his younger self, drenched in sweat, hand raised after a shot. He whispered, "Back then, they erased my name from the roster. But today, my name lives in the hearts of thousands of children. That is the true victory." He closed his eyes, smiling. The legacy had been passed on. And basketball, at last, no longer belonged to any one color of skin. He had walked the entire road. From a skinny boy with a patched-up rubber ball, to the young man driven off white courts, to the athlete who made entire arenas rise to their feet in applause. His life was a long chain of sweat and tears, woven with humiliation and unshakable ambition. Many asked him, "How did you endure so much injustice?" He only shook his head and smiled. "I didn't endure. I fought. Every shot, every drop of sweat that hit the floor was a blade carving my name into history." Some said sports were only a game. But he proved otherwise. On the court, justice could be rewritten. Every time the ball swished through the net, it wasn't just a point. It was proof that human worth could never be measured by skin color. He sat in an empty arena, looking down at the silent court. In his mind, the echoes of pounding shoes and bouncing balls still played, the soundtrack of his life. He remembered the days his name was erased from rosters, the long nights crying into the ball, the jeers that tried to shove him off the floor. And then, he remembered the moment when the entire arena stood and clapped, the moment when true justice existed. He knew, one victory doesn't erase injustice. One season doesn't change an entire society. But it opens a door. And that door, the next generation would walk through, no longer stopped by the barrier of skin color. He whispered softly, "I didn't play to be accepted. I played so the world could no longer deny the truth. We exist, we are talented, and we deserve to belong." Maybe you live in an unjust society. Maybe you've heard the denials, the laughter, the cold words, "You can't." But remember this, as long as you keep standing, as long as you shed sweat and tears for your dream, one day the world will have no choice but to listen. And the final, unpolished truth is this. The world may feel unfair, but we must keep fighting until we create a new, more just society.